Well, 7 years later and I'm finally doing it. Hello everyone, my name is Roselle and welcome to my channel. So yeah, I wanted to make this video 7 years ago, but my excuses and my procrastination know no bounds, I guess. It was the summer of 2017, the summer before my senior year of high school. It was my first trip outside of the United States that I remember. I'd been to Thailand a handful of times, but I was too young to really remember, and I had been to Vancouver, Canada, but it was a business trip for my parents, and I only remember like 2 things from that, so I'm not gonna count that. Anyways, the reason I was going to Europe was because of the Oregon Ambassadors of Music. The Oregon Ambassadors of Music, or OAM for short, is a music education program that takes high school musicians aged 15 through 19 on a tour to set destinations around Europe. The way it works is your band teacher nominates you for the trip, you pay a lot of money, you go to a placement or chair audition, and then you go to a band camp where you learn all of the music you'll be playing at the various European cities that you'll visit, and then you go on the trip, visit said European cities, where you will sightsee and eat, make friends, play music, make everlasting memories, etc., and then you go home. That is essentially it. So if you're interested in that and you want to learn about my personal experience going on such a trip, then please keep watching because I'm going to talk about that right now. So as I mentioned, I, along with a handful of other kids, got nominated. I don't know how many students were nominated. I'm pretty sure it was more than the amount that actually went because it was pretty pricey and obviously your parents had to be okay with it. So from my school, there was a total of 6 band kids that ended up going. There were also choir students from my school that went, but I don't know anything about the choir portion, just that they went. Unfortunately, since I waited 7 years to make this, there are quite a few details that have slipped from my memory. So you're gonna hear me say I don't know and I don't remember a lot, but thankfully it's mostly logistics. For example, I don't remember how long we had between knowing we were going and actually going. I know it was at least over a year, maybe 2. They want to give kids enough time to either work or fundraise the money, of which I don't remember the exact amount, but I want to say it was around 7,000 give or take, which is a lot for a teenager, but thankfully I had a job and I was able to make it work. Whatever the price actually was, I definitely think it was worth it, but I'll talk more about that towards the end of the video. Editing Roselle here, I did not do that, but basically what I was going to say was that 7,000 goes towards hotel, travel, tickets for everything we did, food for most of the days, minus like 1 or 2 meals, airplane. You're already pretty much nearing that 7,000, but then you're also paying for that like peace of mind, not having to plan any of that, everything just being taken care of for you, all that. I definitely think it's worth it. Thankfully, I do have these from my trip. They are the holy grail of today's video. This was a day-to-day itinerary of everything we had planned. And this was essentially a guidebook that went into great detail about everything we would need to know about everywhere we went. But yeah, unclear with the timeline of these events, but they sent us music to practice for our audition. And this was an audition where everyone involved had to go to Portland and play in front of a couple people. And then later on, they would send you your music in your part. So, like, you weren't not gonna go if you did bad because you were already nominated and you're paying the money. But you could either be first chair or last chair and everything in between. And when the time came, there was band camp. This took place at the Lewis and Clark College in Portland, Oregon. That is also where the auditions were held, I believe. I again do not remember how long band camp was, but it was at least a couple days because we stayed in the dorms overnight. And I know I've shown some of my pictures already, but these were the first pictures I took of the trip because technically this was the start. Because right after band camp, we left for Europe. And before I get into that, just a quick disclaimer. I apologize for the quality and quantity or lack thereof of my pictures. I think I was trying to be artistic, but they just ended up being bad. So I will supplement visually with Google photos here and there, but I will mark those ones as not mine. So if it doesn't have that marking, then it was a picture I took. And I'll try my best to line up the photos with what I'm talking about, but again, I remember what countries I took them in, but not necessarily each place. Also, there was a stuffed animal in like half of them. It was just this thing I was doing back then. I don't know, don't ask. Also, I'm going to mispronounce a lot of things, so please be prepared for that. Anyway, we flew out of PDX, I believe, July 3rd, and landed in Heathrow International Airport July 4th. First stop, London. Initial thoughts, it wasn't what I imagined, but it also was. Our first full day was filled to the brim with sightseeing. In no particular order, we got to see Trafalgar Square, Big Ben, which unfortunately was under construction when we went, so I didn't get to see it in its full glory, and the London Eye off in the distance. We also got to go to Westminster Abbey and attended Evensong, which I recommend even if you aren't religious, just for the experience. According to the thresholds, we stopped at Windsor Castle before all of that, but I would be a liar if I said I remember that. We stopped at Buckingham Palace to watch the changing of the guards. And story time, while walking around the area, there was a couple cars we saw pass that caused some commotion because apparently it was Prince Charles in the car, so that's cool. But while I was distracted, my high school history teacher came out of the blue and was like, "Roselle!" And I was like, "History teacher!" And it was just the trippiest thing because he was on a totally separate trip with EF Tours and I had no idea. And the fact that we were in the same place at the same time, just thousands of miles away from our hometown, was crazy. Like, I know they say it's a small world, but oh my god. Anyways, I think it was also that night that we went to the London Theatre and watched Les Mis live, which was just, I believe that was my first live professional play I had seen, and it was so good. And let me just say, I love this shit. I love just walking around and looking at stuff. Anyways, it was great. We saw a lot more stuff. The next day, we got to watch the choir perform in Wesley's Chapel, and later on, we played our first concert in Casiopberry Park. And I'll take a short moment to talk about the music. So this was my music folder, and the music that we played was, I would describe it as American music. Things like the Blue and the Gray and jazz and the Stars and Stripes, Songs of the Plains, The Wizard of Oz. I guess that's American. And I played the tenor saxophone, if I did not say that already. But yeah, we stayed at the Copthorne Terra Hotel, Kensington. And not important, but thought I would mention it since I have multiple pictures of this. But I did face masks at every hotel that we stayed at. And for the life of me, I cannot remember if I brought them or bought them. I don't think I bought them there. I think I brought them overseas with me so I could do them with my friend. So yeah, there's that. And yeah, London. It was great, but it was the first stop of 7. Next was Paris, France. We loaded our buses and headed to the port of Dover, where we took a 2-hour ferry to Calais, France. I had never been on a boat this big before, and it was kind of scary, but still very cool. Our drive down to Paris had some very familiar views. The French countryside was very beautiful, but it wasn't much different than the countryside over here. And I don't know, I really liked that. It felt really human? Earthly? Anyways, we eventually got there and we stayed at the Pullman
Montparnasse
Hotel. It had a view of the tower, so on our first night, we all went out to watch the lights. On our first full day in Paris, we went up to
Montmartre.
We had to walk up it, so needless to say, I was dying. But I made it to the top and it was definitely a sight to behold. I had a crepe to recoup and we did some sightseeing. The next big thing we did this day was visit the Louvre. This was probably my favorite thing we did in France. I would love to go again. Again, it was just walking around and looking at art, but ugh, I love it. And we ended this lovely day with a boat ride on the river Seine. The next day we went to the Eiffel Tower and again climbed an ungodly amount of stairs. I want to go again and climb to the top, but me and my group only had it in us to climb to the main area, I believe. Afterwards, we drove around the Arc de Triomphe, and that was crazy. I'm so thankful I could see that as a passenger in a coach because I could never drive in that traffic, but our coach driver was amazing. We all asked him how he did it, and he just said that he was bigger, so they will move. And yeah, as I've been mentioning, we got around most places in a bus or coach, of which there were 7. All of them were assigned a color, and our bus was the yellow bus. Our bus driver was named Wolfgang, which I felt fit perfectly. And so our bus load would call ourselves the Wolf Pack, and our group call or chant was howling. Anyways, after the Arc, we went to Notre Dame, and it was a beautiful piece of architecture. I was sad to hear about the fire when that happened because this was something that I actually got to see beforehand, and it was one of my favorite churches we saw during the entire trip. But that was mostly it for sightseeing in Paris. I really enjoyed the views and the food, but I do have to mention the street sellers / vendors. If you know anything about Paris, then you already know what I'm talking about, but there was a lot, especially around
Montmartre.
In fact, another story time. I was actually grabbed by one on my way up the hill. The coordinators warned us beforehand and told us to look out for them and just keep walking. And that's what I did, but they were very adamant on getting our attention. Thankfully, my friend was right behind me and kind of pushed him off, but I was definitely shaken by that. Paris has some beautiful sights, but I have to say out of all the places we visited, I felt the least safe here, which is unfortunate, but that's just how I felt. I'm not necessarily in a rush to go to Paris again, but I would love to visit the Louvre again and see other parts of France. Hey Google, how do you pronounce Montparnasse?
That's pronounced Montparnasse.
Montparnasse? No. More like Montparnasse. Next was Switzerland. Switzerland was one of my favorite places, if not my favorite. We drove all the way, and this is when the whole tour group starts staying in separate hotels. So I don't remember exactly which one I stayed at, but the Hotel Art de Vivre was the main one in Crans, Montana. The views were amazing and the temperature was very nice for July. I can imagine it gets very cold when it's not the summer, but for us it was perfect. We spent our first full day exploring the surrounding village and then visited the Castle of Chillon, where we got a dungeon tour. We walked along Lake Geneva to Montreux, where we saw some performers and this statue of Freddie Mercury. We played our concert that night, and the next day we drove to Tash, where we boarded a train to Zermatt, rode the funicular up to the Matterhorn, oh my god, and spent time basking in the beauty. These words are going to be the end of me. I think this place left me the most awestruck. Unfortunately, while we were there, there was a cloud obscuring the tip, but it was magnificent nonetheless. That just means I'll have to go again. After we got back, we had a Swiss party where there was a fondue, but that was the end of Switzerland, unfortunately. Onward to Austria, but first, we stopped in Little Liechtenstein for lunch. My small group decided to get lunch there, so unfortunately we spent all our time doing that, meaning I didn't really get to see much, so because of that, I don't have much to say about Liechtenstein. Again, that just means I'll have to visit again. We arrived in Seefeld, which is where we stayed in Austria. On our first full day, we headed to Innsbruck, but first stopped to look at the Wilton Basilica and the Winter Olympic Games site. Innsbruck had some good shopping, and we finally tried a European McDonald's. Our coordinators strongly advised against this because they wanted us to try more authentic stuff, but just for one lunch, we had to compare. It was pretty much the same if I remember. We played our concert for Austria that night, and the next day was actually a day trip to Venice, Italy. According to my itinerary, it was a 5-hour drive there, and then we took a vaporetto into central Venice. We did a lot of sightseeing and took a tour of a glass blowing factory. Venice probably had my favorite shopping of all the places we went. I love shopping and I enjoyed shopping everywhere we went, but I really liked it here. After our day in Italy, we head back to Austria for one last night before we move on to Germany, our last country of the trip. From our hotels, we headed to a more somber destination of Dachau. If you don't know what Dachau is, it was one of the first and one of the longest running concentration camps built by Nazi Germany. It now stands as a monument to the past. It was definitely an experience I will never forget. I really liked that this was a stop just because I love learning, but I also thought it was really important. And I'll never forget what it felt like to be there. I watch a lot of ghost hunting content and related content for fun, and a lot of the time they will say that they can feel the negative energy, and it's not that I don't believe them, but standing within the walls, you can feel this just deep energy running through the place. And if that's how it felt decades after the fact, then obviously I can't even begin to imagine how it felt for the prisoners there. After this important visit, we made our way to Rothenburg, which is where we would be staying for the rest of our trip. Our first and last full day in Rothenburg was mostly free time to explore the walled village and shop. We performed our last concert this day and watched the choir perform theirs, and then there was a little more free time before our last night goodbye to Europe party. It was definitely bittersweet. We met in a large open building where we danced and reminisced until they sent us to bed for our trip home in the morning. And that was pretty much it. We flew out of Frankfurt back into Portland, and I never saw or spoke to anyone I met on that trip ever again, aside from the kids from my high school. But anyways, now that you know essentially what happened on my trip, I would like to talk about some things I learned and observed. And these are my own personal opinions, so please keep that in mind. First off, culture shock. Honestly, the biggest culture shock I experienced was the architecture. There were statues everywhere, statues on everything, and it was awesome. I loved it. I wish we had more of that here. Things were very ornamental and just beautiful. Next would be the drinks and food. Like, I'm not an ice girl, so it's okay, but ice was just not part of the equation with the drinks over there, and it was just different. And this could just be me, but a lot of places made it seem like water was not a normal beverage to order. My first restaurant experience in London, I ordered a barbecue chicken dish, and I was shocked when they brought me a whole half of a chicken, and it was so fast. Someone please let me know if this is normal. In Paris, I tried escargot for the first time, and I actually really liked it. I didn't think I would. One of the last nights in Austria, the whole group was catered to brats, and I will forever be chasing that high. Switzerland definitely had the best dairy. The cheese, the fondue, the chocolate. Anyways, those last few things weren't culture shock, but just some of my favorite foods I had. On a more sour note, but I think it's important to talk about, rude people. There was so many times we visited churches and they had rules like having to be a certain amount of covered up or no pictures or something like that. And people would just not listen, or they would listen enough to get in and then just disregard it afterwards. It was really frustrating to see because even if you don't agree with a religion or certain ideas, if they ask you to do something just while you're visiting their space, then do it or don't go in. While I was at Dachau, there was a family taking pictures, which normally wouldn't be a problem, but they were making silly faces and laughing and just being overall obnoxious, and I just couldn't believe it in a place like that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that bad or rude people are everywhere, and traveling made that apparent. But last thing before we end the video, because I love showing off my stuff, I'm going to dedicate a little section to the souvenirs I got. So Haul time. 7 years removed. I gathered everything I could find or remember, but I know there was more stuff. I just, again, after 7 years. Anyways, near the restaurant that I ate in London, there was a makeup store called Mina, where I got this eyeshadow, this lipstick that I'm wearing, and this highlight that I actually use all the time. It's my main highlight. And I just realized that these are all over 7 years old. Anyways, I believe I got this in London. It is tea, of course. Also 7 years old. I don't have it with me, but I got tea in Austria as well when I went to Innsbruck. In Venice, I got this mask because classic, and I got this stamp as well as a glass dip pen, but I can't find that. In Liechtenstein, I did get this tiny little bag, so cute, and it holds all my old European coins. In Germany or Rothenburg, I got this cup, and I did actually get some of these chopsticks from there too. Not all of them. And I got this dagger. I had to get this shipped because obviously I could not take this on the plane. I got these undies from Switzerland, and I got this like belly dancer belt in Innsbruck as well. Also in Switzerland, I got this Swiss Army knife that says Benson. So yeah, there was definitely more, but that was the main things, I believe. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So thank you so much for watching to this point. It was a long one for sure, but it was a long time coming. Now I can finally file this trip away for good. And if I could give you one travel tip, take more pictures, record more stuff, and if you plan on making a video about your trip, do it sooner rather than later. And I don't normally do this, but as of the recording of this video, I am less than 50 subscribers away from 500 subs. So I just want to take this moment to say thank you so much to everyone who has subbed so far. And if you aren't subbed yet, then please consider helping me to my goal of 500. Leave a comment if you've been to any of these places or if you've been on a similar trip. I would love to hear your thoughts, and I'll see you in the next one. Dude, his face is all black. We live That's so, dude, that's so cool.
It's a thing.
In the bird world.